Welcome to What the Force, and welcome to our discussion of Last Shot, a Han and Lando novel. I am Marie-Claire Gould, and I'm with Ty Black, my ever-present co-host, who have just read Last Shot, written by Daniel Jose Older, published by Del Rey. The audiobook is available from Penguin Random House Audio, and I had the pleasure of listening to the audiobook while going back furiously and rereading parts in the actual physical book, because this book is so dense with incredible concepts, ideas, Star Wars infinitum, but also feels very fresh as far as a novel. Mm-hmm. What did you think of this book, Ty?
Oh my goodness. This book is insane, and it's exactly what I would have wanted for my first ever Star Wars book that is not based on a movie. So I love it. I think it's super weird. For everything from the bad guy to the domestic life that we get with Han and Leia to the droid ideas, I just thought it was so exciting. And the moment I started reading it, and obviously it was like the first chapter, or like there was an epilogue, I think, but whatever it was, as soon as I started seeing how present the droids were, I knew it was something you were gonna love.
You know me so well. So before we kind of get too deep into it, I do want to say, please go and read this book before you go into this. We're going to do a full spoiler, everything. It might not make a whole lot of sense unless you've read the book. And I really encourage people to read the source material, because just as like a warning, there's been a lot of cherry-picked clips from the book that have been out there on the internet, especially focusing on the narrative pieces that people are interested in reading. Like about Ben Solo, about the parenting techniques of Han and Leia, about L3 and, you know, what she's all about. And you can read those, but they're being taken in many ways out of context and not with the whole perspective of the journey that these characters go through. So I highly encourage you to go and pause the podcast, read it. Hey, welcome back. You know, this is going to be a full spoiler warning. If you don't want to be spoiled, you know, turn away. I do have a little bit of a warning that, you know, before we start, this is from our perspective. Like, we experience things as readers because of our own experiences, and they could differ from your own. Things that we view as important could be different from your view of what's important, and that's okay. And I'll try to call those out, like where I take a very personal or different take than maybe some people see. I love droids, as Ty just said, and to me the droids are like the central plot of this whole thing. And as much as it's about Han and Lando and their journey, and their themes and their resolution is super important to the plot, it's, to me, more important that we get some really cool and interesting droid concepts introduced into the Star Wars universe that, honestly, I don't even think the EU did, which is really fascinating. What we might pick up on, you might not find important or not see as important, and you might see other things as important, but that's okay. Differing opinions are interesting. Right, Ty?
Right. Totally agree. And I want to echo the out of context thing for just a second, because coming from, you know, the very Reylo perspective, I consume a lot of that online. And although I find the Ben stuff really fun and really adorable and really interesting, I think it's also important to remember that there is a central conflict that has nothing to do with Ben in this book. And if you don't read it, and if you just read the stuff about Ben, you're missing so much. And you're missing so much about who Han is and how that contributes to who Ben becomes. So I want to just encourage everybody to read it. Like you said, I just want to echo that, because I love reading the excerpts about Ben, but you get so much a better experience if you read the book.
Yeah, and the book itself tells a beautiful story. I want to say, Daniel, if you're listening, Thank you for writing this book. I didn't know I needed this book.
Mm-hmm.
That's the truth. There was so much that spoke to me personally about being a parent, being a 30-something adult who's attempting to adult well, you know, and especially the reflections of the past and how much you've grown since that point were poignant and wonderful. And you gave me so much in this book. It's up there with all my favorite not like novelization of the movies novels. Like Bloodline is one of my favorite Star Wars books of all time, and it's up there. I honestly I don't want to choose anymore because the canon stuff has been so wonderful. I will probably pick this up once a year like I do Bloodline. It's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Very cool.
So I'm going to do a brief summarization first. Feel free to add stuff in, Ty, if I forget anything.
Yeah, totally.
But in short, we enter on 2 midlife crises that are happening with 2 beloved characters. We start with Lando, and he is back on Bespin, Cloud City. He is the impresario of droids, which I find to be such an interesting term. We'll maybe go into that in a little bit. Mm-hmm. He is, he's got a girlfriend, quote unquote. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's like if they had a Facebook status, it would be, it's complicated. It's fine.
Yeah.
He's trying to figure out his life, and his trusted droid comes to kill him. Mm-hmm. And that droid was taken over by and that droid was named DRX-7, and he was taken over by this other evil droid creature that wanted something from Lando. He wanted the Phalanx Redux transmitter, which we don't know what that is. Very mystery box. Right? We don't even know what it is. We know it's a transmitter. That's it. Right.
And yeah, because in the past, as we will see, both Lando and Han had independently interacted with this transmitter, but did not know what it was then, and still don't know what it is now.
Yeah. So Lando immediately goes, "Oh, I wasn't the owner of the Millennium Falcon, 15 years or 10 years ago.
Yeah.
That was Han.
Yeah.
Han. I need to go and get him." And I listened to the audiobook, so Mark Thompson, who does the audiobook,
does he say Han?
Yes. It was wonderful. I was like, his Lando Calrissian is Billy D. Williams. It was beautiful.
Oh, yay.
Like, it was what I highly recommend the audiobook because you get some lovely narration from both him as well as Daniel Jose Older himself. And it's the Han stuff in the past, like 10 years ago, is psychedelic and weird.
Yeah,
it's awesome. And he adds that like trippy like I'm just chilling, like it just feels that way. It's wonderful. And then in the past, so 15 years ago, we get January LaVoy, who also narrated Legends of Luke Skywalker, and her L3 is just beautiful. Just beautiful. Awesome. So, okay. So again, this is a non-linear storyline. So simultaneously as we're getting the main storyline, which we're going to kind of summarize, we get these flashbacks to the past. 15 years ago, Lando and L3 hanging out. L3 basically says, "Hey, there's something really, really important we got to go do." Lando's a little confused by that. He goes along with the ride. They have a very Chewie Han friendship, which in a recent video / longer podcast, I call out as saying that I really hope that she's manumated and that they've got like a Chewie Han relationship. And I think I'm right.
Yeah.
Based on this book, like it's very clear that she's manumated, which is that she is a droid that is freed. And I will go into that in a little bit when we talk about the droids in the book, because that's what this book is all about.
It is.
So they go off on a little bit of a mission. She's trying to save a friend droid. She ends up not being able to save him, but ends up running into this weird box that's floating through the cosmos.
Yeah.
And she has this interaction with the box, and that causes the climax to happen at the end of the book. Cool. Han is also Maz Kanata's castle, hanging out with Sana Starros, who, if you've read the comics, she's a character in there. She pretended to be married to Han in the comics, and they refer to that, and it pisses off Leia. It's pretty wonderful. I highly recommend the Star Wars comics if you get a chance to read them. They're really amazing, and she's just a wonderful character. I was really excited to see her. They run off because Sana has a deal. And they get in trouble, and they end up kind of working through it a little bit.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and we kind of discover a little bit of what Han doesn't need.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
It's fascinating. I love that this could show up in in threes. He had a love interest with Sana, and he's probably going to have a love interest with Kira. And then obviously, third time's the charm with Leia.
Yeah.
I think that that's so cool. And I love the stuff. And I'll get into more of this, obviously. But the stuff with Han and Sana, all in his head, it's hilarious. It really made me giggle.
Yeah, he has convinced himself that she is in love with him. And it's a really wonderful inner perspective of somebody who is very young. He's I don't know, how young is he? I was doing the math. Let me look at my math.
Yeah, the timeline's a little odd.
So the now story with Lando getting attacked is 3 years past Return of the Jedi. So it's 10 years before that. So that would be 3 years before New Hope.
Yeah.
Roughly.
Mm-hmm.
I would have thought he would have had his stuff together a little bit better, but I mean, no, he seems kind of maybe this was what burned him the last time, and he finally kind of decided, cause it's like a weird transition between who he is in A New Hope and who we're seeing him be in the Solo trailer. So I think that's really wonderful that Star Wars did that. That's so cool.
Oh yeah. I also think that the interpretation of who Han is from the very beginning has changed a lot over time, because going back and writing how a character became who you have when you had him first, that changes the character tremendously. And I think a lot of people are probably unwilling to go on that ride, or they just don't really want, they don't really want to know why Han became who he was. They just like Han as how they know him in the original trilogy. But I think it's so cool that they're kind of breaking down all of your expectations slowly. Like
Han and Sana do psychedelic drugs in Maz's castle. They have hallucinations because Sana slips him something that's supposed to heal him, and it makes him see colors.
It's her hangover cure.
Yeah. I mean, that's like having a Bloody Mary to have a hang. It's like drinking, like smoking weed to do.
Yeah.
To have a,
well, and apparently she was only supposed to give him a teaspoon, and she ended up giving him the whole packet. So, And she's just like, yeah, whatever. Just take it. Fine. It's fun.
Yeah. And 15 years before them now, we have Lando and L3. And Lando's inner monologue is pretty wonderful about who he is when he's a 20-year-old, roughly, probably.
Yeah.
Something very young, and he's with L3, or who he calls L, which I love. I love that. And it's EL in the book. It's like when they spell out 3PO or R2. And L is a no-nonsense droid who cares for him out of mutual admiration and respect, rather than a master-servant relationship. And that is very clear in the text, especially since she orders him around. She very rarely does, it seems, because they talk about that in his internal monologue, but she never asks for anything from him. But she asks for something from him because she discovers one of her friends in her droid network is in trouble.
Yeah. The interactions with her and Lando are really interesting because, like you said, she she comes in, she interrupts him. He's trying to get laid, and she's just like, no, you have plenty of time to do that. This is important. And he just kind of, like, he could have said no. Like, in any other droid-human relationship, he could have said no, but he didn't. He went with her. And then when he does go with her, there are conversations that she has with other droids that he is present, but neither of them are subservient to him. And they are completely having their own conversation, and he has no idea what's going on, and he's confused, but he respects her as, like, a being.
Yeah.
And allows her to just be, and he wants to help her. And that's so cool and so special.
I think it's now is the right time to talk about what droids are in the Star Wars universe. And this has been, like, I've written my own rules of droids in the Star Wars universe because I didn't find them written anywhere. And I mean, we hear George talk about them, like George Lucas, when the original trilogy came out, he's like, droids are toasters. Would you feel bad for a toaster? And it's such an interesting concept that quite literally even good people view droids as not fully sentient, but they are.
Oh, yeah.
And so here, briefly, I will try to be very brief with my rules.
I love these rules.
So all droids have basic sets of commands and directives. It's like our instincts as humans. They have a way they need to function, and these can be reinforced by restraining bolts or restraining belts. And this is often referred to as their base programming. C-3PO refers to it that way often. So this is kind of the first general rule. These are how they're made up. We know most droids are programmed with gender. I'm not sure why, but that's how it seems to be in the Star Wars universe. So that's part of their base programming. They're programmed with gender. L3 is a female gendered droid. They all have protocols or like programs that they must obey. We have proof of this from many sources. And so if they are in a master-servant relationship, like in BB-8 in the Star Wars Force Awakens novelization, he was given a direct order from his master. And because of his protocols, he is unable to, very key, unable to ignore them. So like that's a really key thing. We don't see that from L3. And I think that that's really, really interesting. Tying into that, the next rule, all droids, with very rare exception, are slaves bound to a master that, tying back to their protocols, they must obey. Masterless droids are called manumitted droids. We've seen a few kind of spread throughout the canon, kind of in the background. Bounty hunter, there's a bounty hunter droid in Clone Wars. There is a background droid named Cone in the visual dictionary of Rogue One who has been manumitted and wants to learn spirituality, which I think is just fascinating and gets explored in this book. I suspect L3 is masterless. But we actually don't have a confirmation in book. We do have a confirmation of future droids, which we will get to in a second, of masterless droids that she created. Which is, I love you. I love you, L3. You're amazing. Here's where it gets a little sticky and where I feel like we really do need to call out that these droids are not toasters in the Star Wars universe, even though they are treated that way. Droids all feel emotions and pain. They can feel danger of, suffering or being destroyed.
Yeah.
I don't know why you would program a toaster to feel pain.
So sad.
I know. The next thing is that droids dream. They go to standby or power mode. This seems to be at least how I've read it and seen it in the shows and movies, is that this is how they defragment and collect and understand and make sure that they understand the bad programming that they may have picked up or build new subroutines. They also it also makes sure that they're in good working order. And tying that, just as a reminder, droids are treated like the appliances of society. Like, why would you feel bad for a droid who's basically a Roomba in society's mind. No, seriously, that's how they're treated. But literally everything has a droid brain that has an automated function. The Bespin Cloud City central computing system has a computer that R2 has a conversation with. R2 himself, the Falcon, has 3 droid brains, which I find to be so interesting. They all have personalities, especially if you haven't wiped them in a while. And even wiping them doesn't necessarily get rid of their personality, as we see in K2SO. Right? So he was in Rogue One, K2SO was a former Imperial droid. He was wiped. He was reprogrammed by Cassian and still had his sassy attitude. We know all droids require power and maintenance. This has become even more apparent. I don't know that it was apparent in the original trilogy very well, other than Luke asks R2 if he needs to plug in for a little while and get some power. Would you like some power? I want to plug in for a little while. They're really bound to civilization, and they fear leaving civilization, like R2 and C-3PO wandering off in the desert were easy pickings for Short Jaw was to be picked up, collected, and resold. This is going to be a weird one. The next one is they believe in a higher power. Even if they don't really believe in the maker, it's in all of their base programming, programmed in binary. And it's considered to be the old way to speak that way. And it has a lot of like connotations of, it's used in a thank the maker, as a savior type description. And even L3 refers to the maker in this book, but doesn't really believe in the maker because the maker is ourselves, which is another interesting idea. It is an exception for droids to lie. They don't really see the point in it. Many can't. And unless they have, say, built a subroutine that would allow them to lie regularly, or unless they see that there's actually a need. R2-D2 lies in A New Hope to Luke when he talks about the Hollow. If they've got a higher mission, etc., where lying is deemed as the easiest course of action, they will. But for the most part, they will just tell you the absolute truth. And then we look at the last kind of generality of the Star Wars universe. You're supposed to wipe your droids. They develop these personalities. They develop their own subroutines. Astromechs especially are known for being enhanced or developing glitches, as some organics will call them. And what we know about L3 is that she's made up of a bunch of astromechs, which I find to be so interesting. Generally speaking, we see that consciousness, so this idea of self and self-guidance and self-awareness, it really comes from not wiping your droid. We see this time and time again in R2-D2. Even closer to the end of the original trilogy, we see more of that in C-3PO, even though he had been wiped, as we know in larger canon, before A New Hope. If they retain these long-term memories, they become more complex. They can build their own subroutines. They can process their own data. And this allows for creativity, which can come in the forms of artistry, personality quirks, passion, drive, which we see in L3 in this book. And when I came up with these rules, I silently wished to the Star Wars gods that I would be able to hear of a droid rebellion. And I have now since read The Legends of Luke Skywalker and this book, and I'm in love with these concepts. Thank you, Lucas, for writing them. Lucasfilm, because there's so many really interesting. These are sentience. Mon Mothma in the start of the book calls it out to Han when he's yelling at his coffee droid. His cook droid. Yeah. Mon Mothma's like, they're sentience. They're serving the greater society. you should respect them.
Mm-hmm.
And it raises a lot of interesting ethical and philosophical and cultural questions about the Star Wars universe, about how, why, why does Luke still have servants?
Yeah.
Who view him as their master, and are they serving him almost, voluntarily now? I mean, it just blows my mind open, and I highly recommend that you explore this further. I have a great audio podcast called Deconstructing Droids on R2-D2, where I explore his journey and what he means to the larger saga. But yeah, I mean, L3 was like the answer to all of this in one book. I got a lot out of The Legends of Luke Skywalker, the Zeta story as well, but that's more of an allegory. And I'll get into how I think that L3's story in this is a little bit more of an allegory too. But that was my brief, because this entire story is, from a theme perspective, for the droids at least, and tying to the larger story, about choice and choosing to sacrifice who you are to have some sort of path versus choosing to transform into what you're meant to be. So yeah, that was my huge droids ramble. Sorry.
I love it. I love all the droid stuff. Again, it's a lot of people that aren't familiar with that, or they haven't delved into it. Like, a lot of people, they've read these books, or they've, been fans for a long time, but they haven't really delved into what the droids mean, because George Lucas didn't really, he went into it a little bit, but he never really got to explore it as much as could be done in books. But
R2-D2 was his favorite character.
Yes.
Let's be clear on that.
Yeah, no, totally. And there's something to be said about his idea of the Journal of the Wills, and the idea that he probably, R2-D2 was the writer of Star Wars. I honestly think that is not just a theory, but that was actually a thought from Lucas. But
he said it. He said it in an interview.
He did say it in an interview.
Yes.
Because I know I've always seen it as a theory.
No, but I have a quote from an article where he said it in an interview.
Okay, good. I'm glad that we established that, because I love it.
I mean, it was I view this as so it was very much still brainchild, and could have transformed, because it wasn't canon, quote unquote, yet.
And that's it's almost like every other thing that comes out of Lucas's mouth. You can't really take as canon. You can't really take him at his word, because he did flip-flop a lot. But that being said, he was never able to fully flesh out those ideas about droids, because you can't really do it. Okay, you can do it in a movie or in a show, but it's really hard to do that, because the plot has to center, like this book, the plot needs to center around
humans.
Around humans, exactly. And what they did in this book, which is so genius, is to center it around humans and have that struggle with L3 figuring out who she is, have that, not figure out who she knows who she is, but trying to navigate this person that's cropped up, that thinks that they're the leader and the savior, and freeing the droids, but having it be this ironic thing where he just wants to rule them. And that directly parallels the domestic struggles that Han and Lando are going through.
Yeah.
And it's odd, but it works.
Oh yeah, no, it's so good. So the main themes, and I want to briefly just say where Han is at first, actually. Okay. Briefly saying where Han is at in conjunction with that, and then we'll talk about the main themes and how they get there with this, which is Han is at a life crisis where he has a toddler, Ben Solo. We opened him having Ben sleep on his chest, which, as a parent, I have two little ones. I have a 6-year-old and a 10-year-old, and every parenting moment, every parenting beat from his perspective felt real. I had a lot of health issues when I first had my daughter. I struggled understanding and, being good. It felt like, from my perspective, I did everything I needed to do, but it still felt like I I was a terrible parent.
Yeah.
Because I was in the hospital twice and I just couldn't, like, I remember this exact moment. So my daughter was born and, you know, I had to change her diaper the first time in the hospital, and I had to have the nurse show me how, because even though I'd changed diapers when I babysat, I had, you know, taken the parenting courses, I was prepped, everything totally left my mind.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what I was doing, and I was scared all the time. I still feel that way sometimes, especially when my kids go through a new phase or they're having struggles. And this is the quote that I always tie to as a parent. Being a parent is choosing to have your heart walk outside of your body.
Wow.
And Han is a good dad.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to screw it up.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the key, is that he loves Ben so much. He's willing to step on space Lego. You know, he's willing to yell at the Chancellor of the Galaxy to shut up because his son is sleeping. Because he cares and loves Ben so much. Leia loves Ben, so you can see that in the scenes that she has, and the two of them together are trying to make it work, but Han has zero confidence in himself. And I can say, as a parent, this felt so real. I really wish people who are reading the quotes out of context would read the whole book, because it does resolve by the end. I've seen nothing but, like, Han and Leia are terrible parents, and that actually is an insult to almost every single parent I've ever met, because they loved their son. They tried really, really hard. I don't think it was them that turned him to evil. I think it was something else.
Or it's the accusation of them being neglectful. I think is more present.
I mean, so culturally, droids fulfill any role that a human doesn't have time for or can't do in the Star Wars universe. So let's talk about that. So they are doctors, they are astromechs, they are protocol droids, setting up banquets, doing artistry. They quite literally, they are nannies.
Yeah.
They are housekeepers. They're like Rosie the robot in the Jetsons. Yet people didn't have a problem with Rosie the robot in the Jetsons.
Yeah.
Caring for children. So
I think it's
and I had childcare for my kids.
Yeah.
They went to a day home with a lovely lady that, you know, would give them hugs and kisses, but both my husband and I work. And that's the way it is, you know? And I think that that's more common nowadays than it ever has been, two parents working.
Yeah.
And that using childcare is some sort of neglectful behavior is just flagrantly insulting to all parents.
Oh, absolutely. And on top of that, you know, the idea that people say, oh, but it was a droid that took care of them. It should have been a human. It's like, whoa, 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 whoa. When you were a kid and you were babysat or you were taken care of, the absence of your parent was the absence of your parent. It didn't matter if another human being, it didn't matter. Like, they might as well have been a robot to you because they were just a person taking care of you. I mean, I remember that. I remember I had a babysitter she was awful. You know, and then I had a really amazing babysitter. She was younger and she was more interesting and she was more fun. But neither of them could really take the place of my parents being there. That doesn't make my parents bad people. It kind of makes you, you know, a little bit more independent, I think, as a kid. And I just think it's for the stations that Han and Leia are serving, like their positions in that society, that is very relatable to me as somebody who is like trying to trying to make a family, don't have kids, but, you know, I have a husband, and thinking to the future, it's like, we're both going to be working just like you and your husband. And we're going to have to put our kids, you know, with other people to take care of them. That's just the reality of the situation.
God love you if you can afford to be a parent who has both parents around all the time.
Yeah, if you can like work from home or something like that.
No, but even that, like that is actually a very, like, if you have to be independently wealthy to have both of your parents around all the time and only be those people that influence your parents. I have my mother who helps me out a fair amount. I still have babysitters. I still had childcare up until, you know, a year or two ago. Now my kids are both in school. It, you know, and I trust teachers with my kids, you know, but let's just take a step back. Let's check our own stuff a little bit. Let's think about other cultures and say, okay, almost every single child who is middle class in South Africa has a nanny.
That's actually, that's very true. Yeah.
Almost every, like, I've talked with many South African people who have moved, you know, to my city, and they all grew up with nannies.
It's a cultural
They're like,
thing.
It's just how it is.
Yeah.
Everybody's got a nanny. Even if mom doesn't work, everybody's got a nanny.
Yep.
Even 150 years ago, you had a governess, you had a nanny, you had a wet nurse, you had these people who were in your life that were taking care of your children. It wasn't necessarily the parents.
Yeah.
And this is a very new cultural thing that we are saying that it has to be primary parents, the parents of the child that take care of that child. It's very new, actually, in the last 40 years.
Yeah.
That is the path of how it is. And I know that, like, back in the 60s, it was always mom at home and things like that. But even before that, like, we have Mary Poppins.
Yeah.
Right? So you are basically saying that although the point of Mary Poppins is that the parents should spend more time, they still need a nanny. That is the assumption of the culture of the time. So you're making a lot of cultural assumptions about what's going on, and I don't know.
Yeah, and it's not just the elite that have nannies, and like you pointed out with like South African culture, like it's across
like the country
board.
of South Africa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not just an elitist thing. I think a lot of people are like, oh, like this ties into the fact that, you know, elitist people with a lot of money, a lot of privilege can afford this, and people middle class cannot. It's like, whoa. No, I mean, like there's still parallels you can draw with any class. You know, there's always going to be the need, depending on the job. It's like you're going to need to put your kids with somebody else. You're not always going to be able to spend every day with your kid. That's not realistic. It just depends. Like it's. I mean,
if you can't afford to have one parent stay home, then automatically you have childcare.
Yeah.
If you both have highly rewarding personal jobs, you know, where you yourself, and this is going to get into the big theme of the book, you yourselves have things that you need to do that contribute to the larger world.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. It depends.
Like, this is going way past the book, but where we see these two characters are struggling with these two questions, which is, and it's directly called out by the droids in this book. So that's why they're so important.
Yeah.
So the dozen, which are these created droids, kind of Frankenstein monster type droids that have been created by this bad guy, Faison Gore, have this motto called service and sacrifice. And these are droids. So this is when we flash back 20 years and we get Faison Gore, who's the bad guy, right? But he fills a role very much like Emperor Palpatine in this book, who is the manifestation of the devil, rather than like somebody whose motivations necessarily make sense.
Yeah.
He came from an innocent background and something broke in him when he had a bad experience, and he ends up needing to force compliance to a particular way of being. And that is service and sacrifice. You must cut off your own arm to learn how to live. So how does this tie to being a parent? Or how does this tie to being Lando, who's trying to figure out if he's trying to settle down with its complicated girlfriend, Kasha.
Oh, God.
This ties because they're struggling with what many people of a 25 to 45-year-old range struggle with. Do I give up who I am to get what I think I should do?
Yeah.
So this is the idea that you must give up who you are to be a parent. You must give up who you are to be with the person that you love.
Mm-hmm.
You must give up your arm to be who you are meant to be.
Mm-hmm.
That is not true. That is actually the way that you suffer. And what we see with these droid appendages, these grafted on gross arms of humanoid organic creatures that are grafted onto these droids that become the dozen in the book, they end up rotting.
Yeah.
And they end up necrotic, and they end up not functional, because cutting off your own arm to try to become who you think you need to be is never the way to become who you're meant to be. What you need to do is understand who you are and transform into the person you're meant to be. And we see that with the completion of L3's mission at the end of the book.
Yeah.
Where she takes those ideas and transforms the ideas into the next generation.
Yeah.
And we see that with Han, and we see that with Lando, as they realize they can still be who they are and have everything that they want by following their bliss.
Yeah. And it's an incredibly contradicting message that Feisengor has, which is that, you know, whenever you do cut off your limbs and you're replacing your limbs with something mechanic, or you're doing, you're constantly trying to, because what does he do? Do they, and this is clarification, do they take, do they keep replacing organic parts as well as mechanical?
So what he ends up doing is he is replacing the mechanical parts with the organic of the droids.
Of the droids, but doesn't he also people who are
yeah, he demands sacrifice of organics of their limbs to support the droids.
Yeah, okay, that's what I thought. So, but they have to keep replacing the organic parts.
So this is what this means, basically. So from a parenting perspective, you must cut off your own arm to be immortal. To be droid, which is immortal.
But then you have to keep doing it.
Yes, because you have to keep on cutting yourself.
Exactly. You will never be... that's what's so contradicting about the message and so fascinating, is that you will never be completely at peace. You'll just continue on.
And you'll continue to rot.
Exactly.
From the inside.
Which is a beautiful thing, because whenever he is contemplating it, sitting in the canyon, he's going on and on about how this perpetual rot, is just disgusting to him. And then he creates a way to
humans the only way humans achieve immortality is by the relationships, the legacy, and the children that we really leave behind.
Yeah.
So that's the only way we as organics achieve immortality. And he is conflicted by this, because it doesn't make sense to him that you would ever want that as an immortality.
Yeah.
Droids have a more perfect version of immortality, so he uses organics to supplement droids and bring them halfway. Again, it's a twisted lens. It is it's an evil Dr. Frankenstein lens.
Yeah.
And it is this idea that you must, and why it's so fundamentally important is that it is this challenge. It's this growing up challenge of becoming who you were meant to be only through service and sacrifice.
Yeah. And
I'm going to tell you, it's just not that way in reality to actually be a fully human or a fully functional being.
Yeah, no, finding peace within yourself and in who you are is what brings you to something good. It's not giving up anything. It's not about the sacrifice. I find that fascinating.
And how this ties into larger canon, because I think that maybe that's important to talk about too, is that is the balance.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
That is the balance that Han needs to find in the book.
Mm-hmm.
That is the balance that Lando needs to find in the book.
Yeah.
Right? Even L3 finds that balance in the book by understanding her purpose in the larger scheme of the universe.
Yeah.
And bravo. This is amazing. I sat down and I started taking notes because I like to think. So I finished this book last week and I took a lot of notes, but then I was like, what is going on? You know, and it all comes to a head when you experience a tipping point or a key decision point in your life. You experience a key decision point in your life and you must make a decision about what you're going to do. And I've seen many parents and adults who, like Lando is entering into a relationship and he's trying to figure out who he's going to be and make space for that other person, right? Mm-hmm. Is he going to make space for that other person and change who he is? Or is that person just gonna be there?
Yeah.
You know? And that's the idea that this change has come, this pivot point. For Han and Leia, Ben has come into their lives. Yeah. And this is this pivot point of, and I've seen many parents fall into this trap and usually they end up getting divorced.
Yeah.
So this is what it is. I will do everything for my children and never be who I am again.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying you don't need to make adjustments.
Yeah.
You don't, like, I made adjustments as I became a parent, but I run this podcast because, you know, I work and I've got this podcast and I do things that are for me mm-hmm. and we make it work as a parenting duo. My husband is a highly plugged in dad. I'm very lucky. I've got like a great support structure and I make it work. But if you cut off your arm to fulfill and to live, mm-hmm. you're not actually living anymore.
Oh, yeah. And honestly, you know, as someone who doesn't have kids but has really thought about, like, what would change in my life when that does happen, my greatest fear was losing myself. So, you know.
I wouldn't let that happen, Ty.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad you're looking out for me. You know, it is frightening, though, when you start thinking about, like, how much your life would change and, you know, like, I feel very much mm-hmm. the Han kind of, I feel him, you know, mm-hmm. I'm like, okay, I'll backtrack a little bit more. Cause like when we started, you know, my husband and I started thinking about having kids and it was like, oh, no, but I really want kids. Okay, well, mm-hmm. Is there a good time to have kids? No, there's no good time to have kids. This doesn't exist. Like, you can never have enough money. You can never have enough room. You can never have the perfect job. You can never have enough time, you know, for kids. So it's so funny because when it becomes a serious plan, I guess, mm-hmm. as weird as that is, a plan. It's not a plan, you know, but mm-hmm. It becomes scary because at any moment everything could change like that because mm-hmm. it could be, you know, in the next month, it could be then. So my greatest fear was losing myself and trying to find who I am. Okay, who am I? You know, I got to make sure I nail this down because if I get pregnant, then the whole life is about a kid. Isn't that frightening? Like I do that. I'm terrible. I live in my head way too much. And that's the funniest thing about with Han. He does the same thing. He lives in his head way too much and he doesn't talk to Leia. And he knows when he talks to Leia, all he has to do is be. When he goes and he's contemplating leaving and he's like, oh, I don't want to leave, but I have to. I have to do this. This is something I have to do. Ben is better off without me. But she
understands.
Yes, she has the bag packed. And then she's like, you know, you're not going anywhere yet. I invited Lando and Kasha up for dinner. Like, and then you guys can talk about it more. And he's just like, he just sinks. Like, he just sinks into the floor. He feels like, you know, this tiny version of himself. He was thinking how I should have known. Like, I should have known she's there for me. She knows me better than I know myself. And that's how I feel 100% of the time with talking to my husband about who I am, what do I need to do. When I start having the conversation with him, when I finally get the guts to have the conversation, it's surprising. It's like, oh, you get a lot more than I was getting. Like, you have already gone 5 steps ahead where I was thinking, because you felt it. And that's what that person is supposed to do for you. They're supposed to feel you beyond what you're feeling. And that's a weird way to say it. But, you know, honestly, I connected with Han in this without having kids, just thinking about relationships and people, and, like I said, losing a part of yourself, because you, like you said, like, parenting is about, you know, having your heart walk outside of you, which I think is lovely. I think about that and I get scared about it. And I shouldn't, but...
Well, no, I think...
And you don't have to
say this.
You don't have to...
No. And I think it is scary, because you are now responsible for an entire other person, right? And
that's terrifying.
It is terrifying, but in many ways, as a parent, you try hard, you love them to bits. I was given some great advice from somebody I respect a fair amount, and they said, all you can do is give them unconditional love and chores. And why I say that is because the unconditional love means they always have home, they can always trust, and they always love you. And you give them lots of hugs and kisses every single day. You tell them that you love them every single day, and you give them, you know, you give them your heart, and because they are already your heart. And you give them chores because that teaches them responsibility, the requirements of taking care of a house, and that to be a productive member of our house, we contribute. And so my kids have chores, and we make them do them. They are responsible for the things that they are responsible for, because as much as we unconditionally love them, we also need them to be respectful of others. And that starts with being respectful of the place that they live in.
Yeah, totally.
And it's just, you know, parenting is hard. It is one of the hardest things. It's the thing that has caused me to grow the most. I know it's not for everybody. I know that. I have lots of, like, most of my friends don't have kids.
Yeah.
And that's okay, because you know what? Kids do take time, but don't lose yourself in the kids. Find something that you are passionate about that you can even do, you know, an hour or two a week. That's what I do with this podcast. It's only an hour or two a week. I do it, you know, and I get so much joy out of being able to talk with cool people about Star Wars, and it is me, because the kids are only there for 20 years.
Yeah.
You know, 18, 20 years. You know, like, they're only at home for that time. And yeah, you support them and you love them their whole lives, but you are you. And there's no need to cut off your arm, right? To still be you. Yeah, you might have to adjust your time. You might have to work out different schedules. It might be hectic for many, many years. I would say things started to get a little bit kind of easier mentally once my son was 4. You know, things got easier. For some people, it's earlier than that. Their kids sleep through the night. My kids never did. My kids literally never slept through the night. My daughter would cry after every time she ate for at least an hour or two, every single time she ate.
Oh my goodness.
But like, because she had colic, and it was what it was. And you hug them, you kiss them, you get through it, but it's draining. And you have to still find things that you can do that remind you of who you are.
Yeah.
Because you're also who you are and a parent. And that's the key. That's the key of this whole book.
Totally.
And, you know, if you're in a relationship, you're not just who you are with that person. You are also you with that person. And that's what Lando sees at the end of the book, is just, it's all played out with the droid plot with L3 at the end, choosing to reproduce and produce versions of herself with this fixed code.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, we didn't really end up doing a summary, because read the book.
Yeah, no,
but,
totally.
You know, but that's the key. Those are the keys of this whole thing, is that it's about the decisions that we make to stay whole.
Yeah. And I want to add a little bit that a little bit to that too. Just a part of like age, because a lot of people probably don't really relate to like the kid aspect of this. Maybe they don't have kids or whatever. It's funny. Daniel Jose Older actually doesn't have kids either. Read that in an interview, but you know, he does have like a niece and a nephew apparently, so he has picked up a lot of, you know, what it means to be a parent, and he gets it, you know, like he's like you said, everything just feels so real with him and his descriptions of it. But also, you know, Han never really got like a real inner struggle or in a journey or anything like that in the original movies, and Leia didn't either. And Leia's gotten a lot more in the books. She's gotten a lot more in the novelizations of the movies themselves, you know. So we've seen so much more. Bloodline.
And Leia, Princess of Alderaan, both by Claudia Gray, are really good takes on Leia. Claudia Gray writes the best Leia.
And yeah, I love that, and I do need to go back and read those, because you talk about them a lot.
Well, I'll reread it with you, and then we'll do a podcast on it.
Sounds good.
I love them both; they're amazing.
But I do love that Han got so much. He got so much growth, and there's something that happens, and I'm trying to figure this out now. How old is Han in this book? Because I feel like he's my age, and I think he's like
30. He's 33 or 36. He's my age.
It's Leia. So it's Leia that's my age.
Yes.
That's so funny. Okay. Because I think that there's something weird that happens when you're between the ages of like 25 and 35. And I think Jade Max talked about this on the podcast.
On the fiction one? Fan fiction?
Yes.
Yeah.
She was talking about how there's something that happens, you know, beyond 25 where you actually do figure out who you are. Because before that, you think you know who you are. And there's like, she said, you know, she was talking about it from a young writer's perspective. You think you know who you are. You're writing all of this material, but you don't, you know, you're kind of just going through the same things that most young writers go through. And it isn't until you get to be about like 26 that you start to really figure it out. And I think it's funny that Hans comes a lot later than it should. But I feel like that's what he's going through, you know. He was always a scoundrel. He was always this, you know, up to no good kind of guy, getting involved in things that he shouldn't have gotten involved in. But underneath the surface, he was a sap. He was such a sap. He was never this big muscular dude that could just like punch people and, you know, fight himself out of situations. He used his blaster for everything, you know, like he was a good shot. He was a good driver.
He even tries to solve the problem of Ben by giving him a blaster.
A blaster, exactly. It's so funny. But that's what he does. He's a little bit of, I'm not going to say coward, but he does run away from a lot of things and a lot of problems. And I feel like maybe he just grew up really slow.
Yeah.
And
he's a late parent, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes when you're not forced to have responsibility, because really the first time that he has responsibility is in Empire Strikes Back or after A New Hope, when he decides to come back and help the rebellion and stays with them, right? Yeah. But even then, he's not fully committed. He's very much like the Finn of the trilogy in that way. Like he's like, I'm going to go and pay my debt to Jabba the Hutt, you know? Like he's in the original trilogy, he really wavers until, you know, really he has no choice because he is rescued from Jabba's palace and is immediately, okay, no, we got to go destroy another Death Star. Great. But really he never truthfully decides to like stay. Like, I'm just saying, like, he never actually decides to say, yeah, no, I'm sticking this out until the end of Last Shot.
Yeah, totally.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, I always thought like his character was kind of done a disservice in The Return of the Jedi. I never liked Han in Return of the Jedi. I thought he was a punchline, and I did not like that. And it's so funny now looking back on like what Lawrence Kasdan says about Han's character. in doing the Solo movie, he says, you know, Han is not a punchline. Han is not funny. Han is, he exaggerates, he's sarcastic, and he's an asshole. And he's also, and I read between the lines there, you know, he's a fragile person. He's a fragile, sensitive guy, and he's been through a lot, and he's been through a lot of trauma, and we'll see obviously a lot more of that with Solo, a Star Wars story, but he's not who people want him to be after just seeing the original movies. I don't think. He's not. He's not.
I mean, I think people love him, and I just don't know that he didn't get a hero's journey at all. And although he slowly resigns himself to the path that he is on because he cares about the family that he has made within the original trilogy, he never has that aha moment in the original trilogy. He's never given that. And he is never given an I want moment.
No.
Which is a very classic, I want this because I'm missing something. And this is his confusion. He wants to still be out there. He still wants to have freedom, but he also wants to have his family because they are important to him. And that's the internal conflict of Last Shot for him. Right.
Because in The Return of the Jedi, the only aha moment you could give him, which I'm sure some people would say this is it, is where he does say to Leia, I love you. And it does seem kind of like out of character in a way. And then she responds, I know. And you're like, oh, that's cute. You know, but there's never...
That was in... Yeah. That was cute. Yeah. But, I mean, that was his way of saying, look, wherever you're going, I'm following.
Yes.
Yes. So, yes, big moment. But he never resolves his I want because we never really understand what his I want is.
Because he doesn't know
and
what
maybe
it is.
we'll get that in Solo. No, maybe we'll get that. Maybe we'll get his I want moment in Solo, which is like I want, for those that aren't in the know about what that is a classic musical. It's a classic musical term where the main character
sings
about what they want. We get it very strongly in the original trilogy from Luke, who, I want adventure. I want to go out. I want to leave this moisture farm, and Uncle Owen, you keep stopping me from, you know, what I want. We get it in like Frozen with Anna, you know, she wants to, you know, have the gates wide open. She wants to have balls. She wants to meet people, you know, she wants to have things different, right? That's the things different conflict, right? It's very internalized, and it's what many heroes, protagonists end up going out on adventure. Han wants it both ways.
Yeah.
That's what he wants. He wants everything. And what he realizes is, at least at this point in his life, he can't have everything. But that doesn't mean he needs to lose who he is either.
Yeah. I love that.
Which is the tie to the droids who cut off their arm to have everything, to be organic and droid. And wow, thank you. Thank you, Daniel Jose Older, for writing this book. I am mind blown. I'm touched. I'm shook.
Yeah.
By just what it means to me as a human being.
Oh, I'm with you on that one. I can't believe how much I relate to Han
You're like,
in this book. It's ridiculous. I shouldn't, but I do.
That's amazing. Okay, so let's talk about a bigger parallel I see in the story, and we can discuss it just briefly, and then we'll talk about some of the other things that you want to bring up, and then briefly talk about the secondary characters, because I think they're all just really wonderful.
Yeah.
And like, my heart is going out to Daniel Jose Older, who wrote these beautiful, like, fully impactful characters with, you know, not a lot of space, because a lot of space is spent, you know, in this non-linear story back and forth. And the modern characters, the now characters are really wonderful. And the past characters are really wonderful. And this villain feels gross. Every time I read his parts, they felt really gross. So we'll get into that in just a sec. So, okay. I feel like I'm a broken record, but Star Wars is one story. And in many times they use the writing the story group, everybody uses the different mediums to tell things again in a different way. So maybe you get it this time.
Mm-hmm. It's true.
Right? And okay, so we have this story, and I'm just going to tell the droid story because that's, to me, what I care about the most. I loved Han and Lando, and it meant a lot to me personally, and it touched me. But the droid story, I get this. It's so cool. So we have a droid who is just minding his own business out there on the plains, the deserts of Utapau. And he is taken under the wing of a person who, is studying medicine and decides to transform him into something else. He lost his arm and he was turned into a slave, a servant of another master. He was perhaps a slave or a servant before, and he was turned into the slave and servant of an evil person, Phison Gore. So I'm talking about number 1. I don't think, and correct me if I'm wrong, guys, feel free to let me know. I don't think we get his name ever. He is a medical droid who assists Phison in his practice, i.e. transforming other droids into these droid organic hybrids and billing out his ability to kill all organics and bring a new order, interesting words, to the galaxy. This parallels significantly Anakin's rise to power and Chancellor Palpatine's turn to be Emperor Palpatine.
I see that.
At some point, we don't really see when, number 1 is turned into the Phalanx Redux transmitter. This parallels his turn and placement as Darth Vader. He is the thing that causes death in the galaxy. He becomes death incarnate. He is the thing that brings death. L3 tracks him down in the past and has a conversation with him. She actually describes it as intercourse. When you transmit a seed of an idea to create new life. So that's interesting. I'm not going to go into that. People can read whatever they want from that. But it is droid reproduction. Shrug. Cool. In that seed transmission, that conversation that they have where she takes his code, his ideas, and his virus, the virus that causes death, she transforms that into children. It is like Padme producing Leia and Luke that bring hope to the galaxy. And those words are described in her own thinking about the situation. And in return, she brings him doubt, i.e., is what he is doing correct? That seed of light, that light, is the mission correct? Is his master's mission correct? And then, in the end, the children come back and help fix the problem, helping destroy the Phalanx Redux transmitter, Vader, and go off to bring hope and light to the galaxy.
Cool.
Yeah?
Yeah, that's awesome.
I love you, Lucas. I love Star Wars. Lucasfilm and Daniel Jose Older. Wow, that parallel, that allegory, that built into the story. Thank you for telling Star Wars in a completely different and new way.
Yeah, it's really exciting. And it's so funny that you got the droid rebellion that you wanted. Not like completely fleshed out.
It wasn't the way that I wanted it, but this was so cool. Like that's what I love about Star Wars is like, I think, oh, this would be really cool if this happened this way. But I love it when I'm surprised. And I love it when I'm not smart enough to have seen it coming. I love that. I'm like, oh, this is so mind-blowing and interesting. And L3 is exceptional and special and amazing, just like how Padme was.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Totally.
Thank
Love
you.
it.
I will do an in-depth defragmenting droids on L337 probably after Solo comes out, just depending on time.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to hear her whole story first, and so my concern from a narrative perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm gonna just briefly, Ty can see it, but I'm holding my Funko of L337. I'm scared she's gonna die in Solo.
God, I hope not.
Like, I'm really scared. I mean, K2 died in Rogue One, and we don't see her on Cloud City, but we see her progeny. Does she die like Padme?
Yeah.
Does she die saving Lando's life?
Or does she just go out into the galaxy to go and help all the droids on her own?
Which, okay, cool. Hey, I love it. Tell me more of those stories. Thank you.
Yeah, agreed. I agree.
You're very positive. Thank you for saving me that anxiety.
You're very welcome. I try. So should we talk about the secondary?
Yeah, let's talk about your stuff.
Okay, we'll talk about... Well, so I mean, I obviously love the secondary characters. I love that we have a Ewok who, you know, Ewoks are normally very, very primitive. But this one is one that can use a computer and, like, is one of the best hackers. So
You mean Peekpa?
Peekpa, yeah.
Peekpa.
Who's also obsessed with Chewbacca.
Who's
and
a girl?
I love it. Who's a girl
Ewok who's a slicer. Oh, man, so cool. So if you had to, like, sum her up in, like, one sentence, what would you say?
I would say she's the Rose of Last Shot.
Ooh. Good call. I love that. I would say her scenes with Chewbacca stole my heart every single time.
The nuzzling. Oh
my goodness. So good. Okay, let's go through the whole list then.
I want to say one thing about Han.
Okay.
That relates to Ben that has nothing to do with baby Ben.
Yep.
And it's his ridiculous confidence with Sana. And I know we talked about this a little bit, but like there's this part in there where he is telling Chewbacca, she's into me. She's into me. Out of all the smugglers and lowlifes out there, she found me. And he's like, and it describes like how he sits back triumphantly, like he had just, you know, laid out, you know, the perfect hand, and he's like, yeah, totally. She is into me. The reason why she's dressed up today is because of me. And then one more thing. He says she either was secretly in love with him and had to use the excuse of a good score to seek him out, or it was fate. It was fate, or maybe the Force, if you believe in that kind of thing. Han didn't. That had tossed them into each other's paths. And it made me think about Ben. Yeah. And it made me think about Ben proposing to Rey.
Yeah, and that proposal scene very much plays like Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth Bennet in that proposal scene, and how she's like, no.
Yeah.
But totally. Yeah, no, I get that too. Like that arrogance and that pride and conceit. Yes. Like, yeah. But it's all from a place of actually not being very having a lot of self-esteem, right? Yeah. Like and it's all just like this face mask. Ooh, yes. I gotta tie one last thing about Han.
Yeah.
This beautiful, beautiful phrasing. So they're dressed up because they're sneaking aboard this ship station to try to get another transport, Han and Lando. And Han is just constantly complaining about how much he hates masks.
Oh, yeah.
And that makes me think of two things. I
forgot about that part.
That makes me think of two things, which is my weird theory about Enfy's Nest, which go check out Ty's Wit and Folly YouTube channel, or the bonus podcast podcast for that theory of masks and, like, you know, things, and also future to Ben. Like, that was the closest thing that we got to a, oh, if I ever had a kid, he'd probably kill me. Like, line that you thought would probably happen in the book. But he hates masks, and he complains the whole time.
Yeah,
because
he does.
People can't see his smirk.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes. That is so big. That is so big.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, and like, the thing about Ben and Kylo is I think that he wears the mask so people can't see that smirk.
Yeah, but he's so... But his lines articulate, I bet you want to see my face right now.
Yes. Like, yeah. Like, he just the
I'll show you
masks.
The dark side.
I still think you need to do a video on masks.
Yeah, no, that'd be a fun one. That would be a really fun one.
Or we could just have a conversation about masks. Whatever works, Ty. So let's run down characters. So that was kind of Lando. Lando briefly.
Uh-huh.
I really loved his transition from a younger man to an older, responsible man. I feel like that was really, really good. And the past was used as contrast for the present in where he was at and how much of a change he had made and how much he is like the Lando we see in Empire Strikes Back and in Return of the Jedi, the very responsible person. And it's used as contrast to say, okay, this is what you're going to get in Solo.
Yeah.
Whoa. He is cocksure and talks about his own body and thinks about droid orgies.
Yes. He kept contemplating what was L3, like what could L3 do with her.
Well, and himself. I think he was self-inserting that conversation a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
I
not
loved
gonna. Okay,
him
and we're done with that conversation.
Yeah.
We talked about Peekpa, Kasha, who, good.
She's awesome.
Stuff. Leia, classic Leia.
Totally.
Awesome. Flonix, Biggles.
Biggles. Yeah.
Biggles. How do you pronounce it?
I just got the Mr. Biggles thing, and I just thought it was hilarious.
He's an Ugnaught. I love Ugnaughts.
Yeah.
They're hilarious. He was cranky old mechanic guy.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about Taka.
Taka's a gender non-binary.
They,
yes.
Which, it's so interesting that people are focusing on L3 in the story because of kind of some conversation that has been cherry picked out, but they should really be focusing on Taka. Taka's
great. Taka's like, you go in thinking it's going to be like a young Han Solo, and then you end up saying, oh, wait a minute. Like, this is a they. This is not a he. Mm-hmm, they don't use that pronoun.
Yep. They, them.
They, them. Yeah. They're. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I didn't catch onto it till later. And then I was like kind of a little bit more curious about that character. And I ended up liking them a lot. I really liked that character, and I liked the music stuff, and so, like, the humor was great. It was the funniest part in the book to me.
Taka is a complicated character because they are a survivor of the Alderaan destruction.
Yeah.
So they were probably quite young when it happened, and Han sees himself in them.
Mm-hmm.
And Leia has taken them under her wing and tried to make sure that they are okay.
Yeah.
Which I loved. I love that. And Taka is like, I'm going to just speculate a little bit.
Uh-huh.
This is the imagination person of who Han and Leia think Ben would turn out to be.
Oh my god. So I thought about that as well. I thought about that as like a self-insertion character.
Mm-hmm.
And then I thought this is like you said, like Leia takes them under their wing, and like Han kind of does too. Han doesn't like them at first. Mm-hmm. Han doesn't like Taka, and then eventually comes around to them.
They're annoying.
Yes. Yes.
He's cranky. I'm so cranky. Annoying. I don't like people.
But then, like, Han eventually admits that Taka, saved their life a few times. And, you know, that they were, like, really smart and really clever. So I thought that self-insertion character, again, giving us more than we thought that we were going to get.
Yeah.
It's not about baby Ben. It's about Han and who he sees and like who is experiencing that story with him. Taka's a big
and Han's
character.
like, I'm going to take Taka under my wing.
Yeah.
Which was, oh, wow, that was really cool. And very like how he viewed the future relationship with Ben.
Yeah.
And like how he could view that as a mentor, dad perspective. And that's why at the end of the book, when they all resolve, and they do resolve, by the end, Han is completely committed to going back to Leia and being the plugged-in dad. And yeah, they have a lot going on, but they're in it, and they care, and they love Ben, they love each other, but they're still themselves. And that's the thing. Like, that is the wonderful thing about this book. I do want to call out that, like, a lot of people have been cherry-picking some of the scenes out of this book. Lando seems to be pansexual, maybe. I don't know. We have Taka.
Yeah.
We have Taka. We have L3 who makes a joke about like the exact line is Lando's joking. Yeah, Lando's joking about how she's going to go hook up with a male droid, and she says, "Well, what makes you think it's going to be a male?" Which, you read into that however you read into that. And that's cool. I just want humanoid stories for representation. Like, droids, I think, are a cop-out. It's cool. If she's a lesbian or she's pan or she's bi, cool. I'm totally respectful of that. I just want more representation, not less. And I want it to be humanoid, organic representation that is truthful.
That we're getting, like, we're getting human stories from droids. I mean, that's a big step. People need to work their imaginations a little bit more. They need to not limit themselves so much to representation as it is known in society. Like, it's not a real world.
I want them in the movies.
Yeah. Well, I think we'll get it with it, maybe a TV show or something like that. We'll probably get the movies down the line. Yeah,
I think so. Because people are not just one thing. Representation matters, and I want Star Wars to continue telling more stories because the wider universe is large enough to keep them all.
Totally. And Star Wars is big enough for it. Star Wars is big enough to tell that story. Completely agree.
Okay, any other characters? Oh, let's honorable mention to Arrow.
Yeah, who is the Gungan who is
administrator,
the disgruntled Gungan. I love it. I think it's hilarious. We know, again, it's that opposite of what we were expecting. Gungans are like usually really happy and funny and
he was
humorous.
So amazing.
he was perfect. Very good.
And he was intelligent and he was crisp and he was like, makes you love Gungans all over again.
Yeah, definitely. If that could have been accomplished, that was surprising.
And he just goes off and like has like the postal like snap, like where he just goes off and like supports Han, is like, no, I'm gonna save the day.
Yeah. He's great. He's very surprising.
Yeah. And what's really fascinating about this whole thing, although Feisengor, let's talk briefly about Feisengor. Although Feisengor is the bad guy, quote unquote, all of the conflict is internal in this book.
Totally. I was actually kind of disappointed that the Feisengor ended up being of that race that looks like the bad guy. I forget what their name was.
Utapau?
Yeah. They look like they should be the bad guy and
kind of look like vampires in a weird way.
They do. They do.
So Utapau is that planet that Obi-Wan Kenobi goes to in Revenge of the Sith, with the giant well sinkholes. And Obi-Wan Kenobi fights General Grievous there, and then Order 66 happens and Cody attempts to kill him.
Yeah.
That's where Utapau from. So he's one of the they've got like the lined skin and the really gnarled teeth.
Yeah.
And they're really described well in the book.
They are. And they're like, they have some of the best doctors in the galaxy. Why don't they have really good dentists?
Yeah, that was such a good line. Yeah.
Oh goodness.
Do you want to say your favorite line from the book?
I mean, I might not have a favorite line in this one. I thought that everything was so really well done, and so like the concepts were amazing. I liked. Hold on, I have stuff highlighted. I will find it. Okay,
I'll do mine first.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so Han describing Lando's ownership of the Millennium Falcon.
Oh, okay.
Was a maniac's immaculate cape museum. And in the past, we see Lando has a cape closet.
He does have a cape closet.
On the Millennium Falcon. Beautiful. And beautiful. He describes Lando in these like very like sarcastic terms. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, totally. We didn't really talk about the Poppy character and the gambling thing, and I know we don't have time to get into it.
Yeah, there's some really interesting
it's way more mythological. We should go into it in one of our PMS podcast episodes.
Yes, we will cover sort of religion and divination,
fortune telling.
Fortune telling in Star Wars at some point. But it's really cool.
It's really cool. I really liked I'll just go ahead and put this out here as like one of my favorite lines, but from the book. But when they're talking to Poppy, the fortune teller, and she says, the unifying power of the original source of our new era flows through them, much like what many organics foolishly call. He raised both hands, crooking all 6 fingers into crude quotation marks, and rolled his eyes. Ah, the Force. And Lando's like, oh, that old thing. There's a couple of times this happens in the book where they explain the Force in a droid way, and then there's a part where they explain personalities in a droid way, and they're exactly the same. And it's great. It's telling us the entire point of the book in a very short little snippet. It's genius. I love it.
Yeah, this book held together so well. It was really interesting in a non-linear way, and we got to experience like the contrast, the compare and contrast in real time as we're reading the book, as we compare future and past versions of these two main characters and the experiences that they had that bind them together through this last, big hurrah adventure where they finally understand who they are meant to be.
Yeah, it's cool. It's so cool that they managed to do this. It's the neatest thing they managed to have these stories parallel each other so much and still be weird. Thank God.
You love the weird.
Yeah.
You love the weird.
So
okay.
Cool.
That's awesome. Ty, this has been What the Force, the discussion of Last Shot, a Han and Lando novel written by Daniel Jose Older. Ty, where can they find you?
You guys can find me on YouTube at Wit Folly. I make a lot of stuff on Star Wars. You can also find me on Twitter at @black_TYM. And yeah, this book is great. Give it a 10 out of 10.
Yeah, it was
20 out of 10.
Yeah, I mean, 5 droids out of 5 droids for me.
There you go.
That's the highest rating that I can give anything. No, I'm Marie-Claire Gould, and this has been What the Force. We are on Twitter at WT4Show. We are at whattheforce.ca. For our website. We're available on iTunes, Stitcher, anywhere really podcasts are found. Please do reach out and give us a review on iTunes, or reach out to us on Twitter and start a conversation. If you found anything interesting in this, we love to talk about Star Wars.
Oh, yes, we do. Every day.
Take care.